My 28 female husband, 29 male, let's call him Mike, and I've been married for 5 years now. Together, almost 7 years. When I first met him, we were at a college party. I could tell he was uncomfortable. He's shy and hates crowds. So I decided to do the nice thing and talk to him. It was not awkward like I was expecting, and we ended up staying together for the rest of the party. The next time we saw each other was a month later. I ran into him at Whole Foods near campus. Again, conversation between us was easy, and I actually found myself flirting with him, which really surprised me. Up until that point in my life, I have never really considered dating a black guy. I'm white, so not that I didn't find them attractive, I just never really had the opportunity. I went to a predominantly white school, so I only ever dated white guys before. When he could tell I wasn't going to leave him alone, he shyly asked me to walk with him so he could finish shopping. After we both checked out, I asked him for his number, and he got the most adorable look of disbelief on his face. He really thought I was playing with him, but after assuring him I wasn't, he gave it to me. I wanted to ask him out then and there, but I decided I had shocked him enough already. I did text him that night, though. After a few weeks of calling and texting each other, he called one day and actually surprised me by asking me out. I immediately said yes. Even though I could tell he was still a little hesitant around me, the date was perfect. Before my husband, I had dated 3 other people, and sex was something that happened early on into the relationship, but not with Mike. I tried to initiate after our second date, but he politely turned me down. I'll admit I was a little hurt, so I asked him why. We clearly liked each other. He told me that he had only dated one other person before me, and that they did things but never went all the way. I told him that wasn't a problem for me. I wasn't really that experienced, but I knew what I liked. I said we could learn together. He then said that he was conflicted because of always telling himself he would wait until marriage and failing with his first girlfriend, then eventually changing his mind and deciding that he had to have real feelings for the girl before he considered having sex with her. I knew he didn't mean to hurt me, but it did. He could immediately see the hurt on my face and assured me that he did in fact have real feelings for me. He was just rambling. We then agreed that we would wait. A few weeks later, I brought him to a gathering a friend of mine was having. Like I mentioned above, he's shy and hates crowds, but he still came because it was important to me that he knows my friends. Most of them were nice, but some of them acted weird towards Mike. Surprised, eventually one of them got bold enough to actually say something. A girl who I thought to be one of my best friends asked me, "This is the guy you've been ditching us for? You could do so much better." That's when I realized what the weird looks were. I looked at my then boyfriend Mike and saw the hurt on his face. I told that friend, "No, he's the one who could do so much better. I'm lucky to even have him." We didn't even stay after that. I found out from a real friend that some of our mutual friends thought I was too good looking for Mike. I couldn't believe it. I never even thought of that. To me, he was one of the most handsome men I had ever met, and I was the lucky one. I called my mom after that to tell her what happened. She didn't interrupt me once while I rambled in anger, and when I finished, she said, "You're in love with him, honey. When are you bringing him home to meet us?" I told her that I couldn't possibly be in love with him. We had only known each other at this point for about 3 months and dating for almost 2. She just said, "You can't really help when you fall in love with someone," and it sounded like I was to her. "That's how it was with my father," she said. "My mother and father have had a very loving marriage, something I have wanted myself after seeing them so happy together." I went to his apartment unannounced after talking to my mom and asked him to just hold me. Eventually, he got me to tell him what was wrong. I told him everything, but what my mom said about being in love. I wasn't ready to say that 4-letter word yet. He told me he actually thought I was way out of his league and might leave him when someone better looking comes along. I've always known that people considered me better looking than most, but to hear him say that broke my heart. I told him that's not true, and that I didn't want anyone else. It went a little back and forth from there until I thought he accepted what I said as the truth. I wanted him and only him. That night we had sex for the first time. Even though it was a little clumsy from his inexperience, I enjoyed it better than any other guy I had ever been with. Now I know it was the love I had for him. Afterwards, when we were cuddling, he brought up our earlier conversation. He told me that one of his biggest fears is being cheated on, and knowing what people thought of our relationship brought that fear out even more. Hearing him talk like that made me so mad. All I could think to myself is, how could people not see how good of a person he was and focus just on his looks? Eventually, after many conversations and me reassuring him, he truly accepted it as the truth. I wanted him and nobody else. A couple of months later, we went to visit my parents. At the time, I was an out-of-state student. This trip meant so much for both of us. Up until this point in my life, I had never brought a guy home, so my parents knew this was serious. When we got there, he surprisingly got on really well with everyone. I told my parents in advance that Mike was a little shy, so they didn't pounce on him when I introduced them to each other. That may have been why they got on so well. My baby brother, who was 2 at the time, and Mike were basically inseparable for our entire trip. I could tell he would be an amazing father. I told him that I loved him for the first time while watching them play. We got married 2 years later. After we had our first baby, Mike started to travel a lot for his business. He offered to let his business partner do most of the traveling so he could stay home with us. I told him that we would be fine. He was only gone for 2, maybe 4 days at a time. One of the times he was gone, I was hanging out with a friend, Rachel, and someone I didn't know joined us. I come to find out that this is a new friend of Rachel. We get on fine at first, then she starts asking questions about my marriage. Am I happy? Does he still treat me the same? I didn't think much of the questions. I just figured they were interested in what marriage was like. Neither were married at the time. So I answered honestly. Yes, I was still very happy and he treats me the same as before marriage. Then they started to suggest that I really wasn't happy. Usually when someone talks bad about my relationship, I lash out, but I decided to ask why this time. They said that Mike pretty much abandoned me after having our daughter. As I mentioned above, he offered to stay, but I knew this was important to him, so I told him to go. I'll admit that I resented him a little for leaving me, but it was never gone long. They went on to say that maybe he didn't love me like before, and he was using these trips as a way of getting away. Deep inside, I knew that wasn't true, but also a small part of myself considered it. I really was stressed out with taking care of our baby girl and dealing with things around the house. After talking to Mike about it, he had a maid service come in once a week to clean, and we decided to hire a live-in nanny. I hung out with them a few more times after that, and that entire time I kept thinking that they were right. Even though he did all of the right things, for some reason it didn't feel like enough. So one day I forgot to put my ring back on, and I got hit on by a guy at a restaurant I was at with the girls I mentioned before. I looked down at my hand and I realized I wasn't wearing it. I then thought a little flirting wouldn't hurt. He ended up talking me into going to the restaurant bar with him. Neither Mike and I are heavy drinkers, but I let this man talk me into having more than I usually do. Nothing happened that night, but I did give him my number. Around this time, Mike had been very busy, so we talked less and less. So when the guy called a few days later to ask me out, I said yes. At the end of the night, one thing led to another, and I cheated on my perfect husband. About 10 minutes into the act, I truly realized what I was doing. I immediately put a stop to it. I told him I was married to a man that I love more than life itself, that this was wrong, and I had to leave. I never told a soul about this, and when Mike got back, I completely rededicated myself to our marriage. I haven't strayed since. Present time. This morning, Mike woke me up at 6 a.m. to tell me that he had to go meet someone. I thought nothing of it, and asked if I should have breakfast ready for him when he got back. He told me no, because he wasn't sure how long he would be. He then gave me a quick kiss and told me to go back to sleep. I did just that, but little did I know the person he was going to meet would be the one to ruin our lives. He didn't get home until 5 that afternoon. I called him a few hours earlier. He told me he ended up at his mom's house and that he would be home soon. Again, I thought nothing of it. Like I just mentioned, he got home at 5, but I didn't know he was there until a little after 6. He comes in through one of the 2 doors, the front or the garage, and I hadn't heard either open. So I called again, and he told me that he was in our room. When I walked into the room, I noticed he had been crying. I tried to go to him, but he pulled back from me like I burned him. He has never done that before. Before I could finish asking what was wrong, he asked me, did our vows to each other mean nothing? I knew what he was talking about as soon as he said it. It seemed like all of the air in the room had been sucked out. The pain on his face broke my heart. When I didn't say anything, he said, "Don't insult my intelligence by lying to my face." I went on to tell him everything like I mentioned above, crying the entire time. When I finished, I started to beg him not to leave me. He brought up this rule about cheaters then. He doesn't give second chances. That's when my crying turned hysterical. I forgot my mom was there, but that's when she came to our bedroom door asking if everything was okay. I went to tell her yes, and she eventually went away. When I came back to stand in front of my husband, he handed me his phone and told me to press play. The man I cheated with recorded us without my knowledge. It confirmed everything I said about stopping it. I will never be able to unsee that, the woman that I love with another man. This was 3 years ago, babe, and I haven't strayed since. It meant nothing. How long ago it was doesn't matter. You had another man's mouth on yours and dick inside of you. How would you feel if I went and slept with another woman? Heartbroken. Exactly. I never felt the need to go and seek attention elsewhere, even when you were being indifferent towards me. You know why, though? Because I knew if we worked towards it, I would get my wife back. I thought I did, but you just felt guilty. No, that's not it. You know I love you more than any other person on this earth. I don't see how you could love me so much and still do what you did. I'll do anything to fix this. Maybe we could go to couples therapy, or I want a divorce. I won't put either of us through the pain of trying to work this out. You know I'll never be able to get that video out of my head. No matter how much I want to hate you right now, I just can't. For some reason, I still love you. I kept begging him to reconsider after that. Eventually, he tells me that I can stay in the master and he'll go sleep in one of the guest rooms. A few minutes after he left, my mom came into the room. I didn't want to tell her what I did, but at the same time, I needed her advice. I could tell she was disappointed in me, but she then told me that my father cheated on her 2 times. I had no idea. I remember a rough patch, but they never separated. I asked what they did to fix things. She said couples therapy, and him never giving up on trying to fix things. She asked me if I told him about being pregnant. In all honesty, I forgot all about that. I was only thinking about losing him. She told me I should tell him, but now I feel like he'll think I'm trying to manipulate him into staying with me. I've known I was pregnant for a few days now, so that's not the case. I truly regret all of my actions. What should I do? How do I fix this? Comments. If you're looking for sympathy, you definitely won't get it here, and you shouldn't. Technically, you don't deserve him. You can't imagine how difficult it is to find loyal people these days, and you, like an entitled little spoiled brat, went on to pursue your urges, despite on betraying that rare loyalty. However, I believe he loves you enough to forgive you, even though I strongly believe that he shouldn't. Now it's down to you to make all the right moves for your relationship and yourself. Oh God, this is terrifying. He does everything right to be the best man for you and your family, and he still gets shit on, especially since you already knew how he felt about cheating. Give him an insane amount of space. It's going to be up to him if he wants anything to do with the marriage. Be prepared to be the best co-parents you can be for your children.